Let's get right into it. Number 10, betel nut. Picture the fourth most popular drug on planet Earth. After caffeine, nicotine, and alcohol, you'd expect something famous. Instead, you get a little reddish seed that hundreds of millions of people are chewing right now, and you've probably never once thought of it as a drug. Betel nut, the seed of the areca palm, is wrapped in a leaf, smeared with a dab of slaked lime, and tucked into the cheek across huge stretches of South Asia, Southeast Asia, and the Pacific. The lime helps release arecoline, a stimulant that delivers a warm, buzzy, mildly euphoric little kick, somewhere between a triple espresso and a cigarette that decided to be friendly. Here's the part that turns the harmless local snack story sideways. Chewers spit out bright crimson juice, so much of it that certain sidewalks look like a crime scene that never got cleaned up. Their teeth stain deep rust red to nearly black over the years, worn like a badge. And the World Health Organization's cancer agency doesn't file areca nut under quirky tradition. It files it under known human carcinogen. Long-term chewing is heavily linked to oral cancer and a nasty condition called oral submucous fibrosis, where the tissue inside your mouth slowly stiffens like drying leather until you can barely open your jaw. So, the everyday little seed that fuels workers, taxi drivers, and grandmothers alike is quietly one of the most widely used psychoactive substances humanity has ever adopted, and one of the least talked about causes of mouth cancer on the planet. It's the drug that hides by being boring. Nobody writes a thriller about a guy addicted to a palm seed, but it's got a bigger user base than most substances that get their own Netflix documentary. The scariest drugs aren't always the exotic ones. Sometimes they're the ones sitting in a market stall, perfectly legal, painting the pavement red. Number 9, bromide. Long before anyone had heard of chill pills, the Victorians had bromide, and they absolutely could not get enough of it. Sodium and potassium bromide were the anxiety cure of the 1800s, a sedative that took the edge off nerves, calmed hysteria, quieted seizures, and generally convinced an entire era that the answer to stress was a nice, calming salt. It went into tonics, sleeping remedies, and headache powders. The famous bromo seltzer got its name honestly. If you were a jittery gentleman of the 19th century, bromide was your friend, your therapist, and your off switch. The problem is that bromide does not leave your body politely. It lingers, builds up dose after dose, and creeps to levels your nervous system starts to resent. The result was an entire syndrome doctors named bromism, chronic bromide poisoning. And it was genuinely strange. Victims got confused, paranoid, slurred, and drifting. Some developed full-blown delirium and hallucinations that landed them in asylums. Others broke out in an ugly acne-like rash. For a stretch of medical history, bromism made up a startling share of psychiatric admissions. People committed as mad who were, in reality, marinating in their own sedative. The truly unsettling twist is how invisible it was. Bromide didn't announce itself. It just accumulated quietly in people who thought they were taking their harmless daily calming powder until one day they couldn't remember what year it was. It took decades for medicine to fully connect the wonder tonic to the wave of confused patients it was creating. Bromide has mostly been retired now, shoved aside for safer drugs, but it left behind a perfect little cautionary fable. An entire civilization soothing itself into delirium with something sold on every pharmacy shelf, absolutely certain it was doing the healthy thing. The scariest part isn't that it was a poison, it's that everybody thought it was medicine. Number 8, nutmeg. Somewhere in your kitchen, possibly next to the cinnamon, sits a legitimate deliriant that people used to get high off in prison. Nutmeg, the cozy holiday spice you dust onto eggnog and pumpkin pie, contains a compound called myristicin. And in large amounts, it stops being a baking ingredient and starts being a genuinely unpleasant, psychoactive experience. This is not a rumor invented to make spice racks sound edgy. It's real pharmacology hiding inside your December latte. Now, before anyone gets ideas, understand what you'd actually be signing up for, because it is a spectacularly bad time. Nutmeg doesn't hit like a fun party drug. It creeps in over many, many hours. You might feel nothing for half a day, assume it isn't working, and then get ambushed. What follows can include a racing heart, crushing nausea, dizziness, dry mouth, a heavy fog of confusion, and a creeping sense of doom that overstays its welcome for a day or two. People describe it less as tripping and more as the worst flu of my life, but paranoid. The hangover is so brutal it functions as its own deterrent. The reason it's on this list isn't that it's mysterious in some far-off jungle, it's that it's mundane. This is a warning wearing a chef's hat. The exact same jar that makes your food taste like autumn is, in bulk, a toxic delirium that has genuinely landed curious teenagers and desperate inmates in emergency rooms. It's the drug your grandmother owns and has no idea about, which makes nutmeg the ultimate proof that natural and safe are not the same word. Something can be organic, ancient, sold in every grocery store and legal in every country, and still be perfectly capable of making you regret your life choices for 48 straight hours. The scariest chemicals aren't hidden in a lab. Sometimes they're hidden in a pie. Number 7. Fly agaric. You already know what this mushroom looks like, even if you've never touched one. Bright candy red cap, cheerful white polka dots, it's the toadstool from every fairy tale, every video game power-up, the single most illustrated mushroom in human history. Amanita muscaria, the fly agaric, is basically the cartoon mascot of fungi, and it is also a genuine intoxicant that has been altering human minds for thousands of years, which is a lot of backstory for something that looks like it belongs on a garden gnome's hat. The active compounds here are muscimol and ibotenic acid, and they do not deliver the kind of trip people expect from a mushroom. This isn't the classic psilocybin experience. Fly agaric is a deliriant sedative oddity. It can bring dreamlike drifting, twitching, waves of nausea, deep sleep, and vivid confusion, sometimes with the peculiar sensation that objects are growing or shrinking. Yes, the Alice in Wonderland size warping thing has a real pharmacological cousin. The catch is that the dose between strange dream and poisoned and vomiting is uncomfortably narrow. Then there's the detail that lives rent-free in every drug trivia collection. In parts of Siberia, the mushroom was reportedly so prized that people would drink the urine of someone who'd eaten it, because the active compound passes through the body still potent. The intoxication could be recycled. It's the single most memorable and most disgusting fun fact in the entire world of psychoactives, and it is, unfortunately, true. So the storybook mushroom you've seen 1,000 times is a genuine mind-altering substance with an ancient ritual history, a razor-thin safety margin, and the least appetizing method of dose sharing ever devised. The scariest drugs don't always hide in the shadows. Sometimes they pose for the fairy tale, wave hello in your favorite game, and dare you to underestimate them. Number 6. Ergot. This is the drug that may have rewritten history by driving whole villages insane. Ergot is a fungus that grows on rye and other grains, especially in cold, damp years, sprouting little dark purple-black spurs where healthy kernels should be. Bake that contaminated grain into bread, feed it to a town, and you get ergotism, a mass poisoning so bizarre and so terrifying that medieval Europe gave it a nickname, St. Anthony's Fire. The horror came in 2 flavors, and neither is kind. One form constricts your blood vessels so severely that fingers, toes, and whole limbs lose circulation, turn black, and can rot away. A dry, creeping gangrene, sometimes with a burning sensation, hence the fire. The other form is the one that reads like a horror movie. Convulsions, muscle spasms, crawling skin sensations, and vivid hallucinations that swept through entire communities at once. Historians have seriously proposed ergot poisoning as a possible ingredient in outbreaks of dancing mania, and even, controversially, as a factor some researchers link to the hysteria behind certain witch trials. That last one is still debated. Nobody has proven it. But the fact that scholars argue about it at all tells you how strange this fungus's fingerprints look across history. And here's the twist that flips ergot from villain to reluctant hero. That same hallucinogenic chemistry is where LSD came from. A chemist studying ergot compounds synthesized lysergic acid diethylamide from this exact fungus, meaning the entire psychedelic era traces its lineage back to a rotten black growth on peasant bread. Medicine also learned to tame ergot's blood vessel effects into real drugs for migraines and childbirth. So ergot is the rare substance that poisoned the medieval poor, possibly fueled witch panics, and then quietly birthed both modern pharmacology and 1960s counterculture. One fungus. Centuries of madness, medicine, and myth. Not bad for something that just looks like your bread went wrong. Number 5. Ibogaine. Deep in the forests of Central Africa grows a shrub called iboga, and its root bark contains one of the most extreme psychoactive compounds humans have ever chewed, ibogaine. For generations, it's been central to spiritual initiation rituals in Gabon, where large doses send a person into a marathon inner journey that can last well over a day. This isn't a recreational high. Nobody takes ibogaine to party. People describe it as being strapped into a full-length review of their own life, whether they wanted the screening or not. But the reason ibogaine keeps clawing its way back into the news is far stranger than its ceremonial roots. It appears to have a genuinely unusual, almost paradoxical effect. It can dramatically interrupt drug addiction. People deep in opioid dependence have reported that a single ibogaine session slammed the brakes on their withdrawal and cravings in a way ordinary treatment never managed, as if the compound reached in and reset something. Researchers are seriously studying why, because one dose that quiets an addiction is the kind of claim that sounds too good to be true. And it partly is because ibogaine carries a serious, well-documented danger. It can disrupt the heart's rhythm. That cardiac risk is exactly why it remains illegal or unapproved in many countries, and why unsupervised use has killed people. This is not a plant to gamble with in a hotel room. The dividing line between profound therapeutic experience and cardiac emergency is thinner than any weekend adventurer should accept. So, ibogaine sits in one of the most fascinating gray zones in all of pharmacology, an ancient African sacrament that modern medicine suspects might be a legitimate weapon against the opioid crisis, if only it weren't quite so willing to stop your heart while it works. Miracle and menace growing on the same root. Menace. Number 4. Toad venom. Yes, the licking a toad to get high thing is real, sort of in the most misleading way possible, and the truth is far weirder than the joke. The Sonoran desert toad secretes a venom loaded with a compound called 5-MeO-DMT, one of the most staggeringly powerful psychedelics known to science. People don't actually lick the animal, despite the enduring cartoon image. The venom is carefully collected, dried, and smoked. And what it produces isn't a gentle nature trip. It's routinely described as the single most intense experience a human consciousness can undergo while technically still being alive. The trip is short, often just 15 or 20 minutes from start to finish, but users describe it as complete ego dissolution, the total temporary erasure of the sense of being a separate self. Some come back calling it the most profound moment of their lives. Others come back genuinely rattled, describing it less as a vacation and more as being fired out of a cannon into infinity with no seatbelt. There's very little middle ground. You don't casually try toad. Here's the twist nobody mentions in the trippy desert shaman version of the story. The toads are living animals, and the surge of demand has raised real alarms about their welfare and their populations in the wild. A species of desert toad is being squeezed to supply a psychedelic gold rush, which is a problem with actual conservation stakes. The frog is paying a price for the enlightenment. So the lick a toad punchline conceals one of the most extreme substances on Earth, harvested from a stressed desert amphibian, delivering a 15-minute detonation of the self that people either treasure forever or never want to repeat. Nature packed a reality-shattering molecule into a warty little creature that mostly just wants to eat bugs in peace. And humanity, being humanity, immediately decided to smoke it. Number 3. Datura. Almost every other substance on this list has fans. People who seek it out, defend it, romanticize it. Datura has almost none, and that alone should tell you something. This flowering plant, sometimes called Jimson weed or thorn apple, grows freely along roadsides and in gardens all over the world, sporting elegant, trumpet-shaped blossoms that look like they belong in a botanical painting. It is also one of the most terrifying deliriums on the planet, and the people who've survived it overwhelmingly beg others never to touch it. The reason is a trio of compounds, atropine, scopolamine, and hyoscyamine, that produce true delirium. Not the pleasant, dreamy kind of hallucination, but the kind where you completely lose your grip on what's real. The signature horror of datura is that its hallucinations are seamless and convincing. You don't see swirling colors and know you're high. You have entire conversations with people who aren't there. You smoke a cigarette that doesn't exist. You wander into traffic believing you're walking through your own living room. The line between hallucination and reality doesn't blur. It vanishes, and the dosing is a nightmare of its own. The amount of active poison varies wildly from plant to plant, even leaf to leaf, so the gap between hallucinating and dead is impossible to predict. Datura has a genuine body count. Its effects can include a dangerously racing heart, soaring body temperature, and full loss of contact with reality that lasts for days, occasionally with lingering damage that never fully lifts. So datura is the anti-drug, the one even the most adventurous psychonauts hold up as a warning sign rather than a destination. A beautiful roadside flower that can erase the boundary of reality so completely you might die without ever realizing you left home. Some plants are pretty. This one is pretty and patient, waiting by the road for someone curious enough to make a mistake. Number 2. Devil's breath. Imagine a drug that doesn't get you high. It gets someone else control of you. That's the legend and the disturbing partial reality of scopolamine, known on the streets of Colombia by a far more sinister name, devil's breath. Derived from the borrachero tree, a relative of the datura you just met, this compound has built one of the darkest reputations of any substance on Earth, because it's associated less with pleasure and more with crime. The stories that made it infamous sound like urban legend, and some of them genuinely are exaggerated, but the core pharmacology is real and unsettling. Scopolamine, in the right dose, doesn't just intoxicate. It can leave a person conscious, awake, walking and talking, while stripping away their free will and their ability to form new memories. Reported victims have calmly emptied their own bank accounts, handed over their belongings, or let strangers into their homes, and remembered none of it afterward. The night simply isn't there. It's the closest thing the real world has to a chemical that turns a person into a compliant puppet with no recording light on. Now, the honest caveat, because this channel doesn't do fear-mongering, a lot of the wildest claims that a single puff of powder blown in your face instantly zombifies you are overblown, sensationalized by viral videos and true crime panic. Scientists push back on the more cinematic versions, but strip away the exaggeration, and what remains is still deeply alarming. A real substance genuinely used in real drug-facilitated crimes, capable of producing docility and blank amnesia. So, devil's breath earns its spot not because it's the most poisonous thing here, but because it's the most violating. Most drugs on this list threaten your body or your sanity. This one threatens something creepier. The very idea that you're the one in charge of your own choices. A whispered dose that erases the night and leaves you an obedient stranger in your own life. Number 1, krokodil. Everything before this was strange, ancient, or unsettling. This one is just a nightmare. The most horrifying drug on this entire list, and the reason it's number 1 is that it doesn't merely alter your mind or threaten your life in the abstract. It devours your body while you're still using it, in full view, and it does so faster than almost anything else humanity has ever managed to cook up. Its street name says everything: krokodil. Crocodile. Named for what it does to human skin. Krokodil is homemade desomorphine, an opioid several times more potent than morphine, that surged through parts of Russia and Eastern Europe as a brutally cheap heroin substitute. And cheap is the whole story. Users cook it in kitchens from codeine tablets mixed with whatever caustic garbage is on hand, industrial solvents, cleaning products, red phosphorus scraped from matchboxes, acids. The finished product is a filthy slurry of poison with a little opioid dissolved in it. Injecting that is exactly as catastrophic as it sounds. Here's the part that lands it at the top. At the injection sites, the surrounding flesh begins to die. The skin turns greenish, scaly, and hard, crocodile-like, then breaks down into open ulcers. Tissue rots. Blood vessels are destroyed. In advanced cases, the damage eats down through muscle to expose bone, and limbs are lost to amputation or gangrene. The high itself is short, but the withdrawal is savage, so users inject again and again, accelerating the destruction. Life expectancy for heavy krokodil users was measured grimly in a couple of years. The most tragic detail is why anyone would touch it: desperation and poverty. Krokodil isn't a drug people seek for pleasure or mystery. It's what addiction reaches for when there's nothing else left and no money to afford anything better. It's the floor beneath the floor. So we end the countdown not with something exotic or mystical, but with something purely mechanically horrifying. A drug that turns your own skin against you, cooked from poison in a kitchen, consuming the people it hooks, flesh first. Every other entry on this list plays with the mind. This one just destroys the body and doesn't even bother to hide it. If you needed proof that the scariest chemicals on Earth aren't the famous ones, krokodil is the whole argument in a single grim word. That's all for today. I'll be making similar videos in the future. Subscribe to see them. End.